The Season is the Reason, Part 3. My name is Daniel Vallis from InformedChristians.com, a website ministry devoted to discerning current events from a Christian and biblical perspective. This is a watch, it's not a prediction. We are merely looking at current events, trying to get a better understanding of the times, so we will know what we should be doing now. We've already reviewed a lot of material relating to this season of time, but let's dive in even deeper. The winter solstice is coming up, which symbolizes the sun being reborn again. The winter sun god is born around this time when the shortest day of the year begins to become longer. And in the pattern of Apollyon, Nimrod, supposedly he was born on the solstice, but then 3 days later is when he came to maturity. And that typically works out to the 25th. We had talked in previous videos of the Mayan calendar and how the December 21st, 2012, that winter solstice was the end of the current great cycle on the Mayan calendar, and it symbolized a time of renewal, starting the next cycle. And there was a lot of hype around that time, and I believe a lot of it was very deliberate. We've talked about that in previous videos, but it signaled a time of light and renewal. And in context of the rebirth of Apollyon, the sun god, it's not surprising that we also saw these themes promoted at the Vatican, with the rising sun, Apollyon, to start off their whole illumination show that they had there. And then also the emphasis on candles, light, and especially in a phoenix motif as well, because these are also connected. So the winter solstice is celebrated and observed as the birth of Apollyon, and a lot of commemorative and memorial events for Nimrod, the original anti-God pattern. Those take place on the 25th, 3 days later. And Hollywood knows that's what this time of year is all about, especially December 25th. It's all about commemorating Nimrod. And even you go to the Kodak Theater there in Los Angeles in Hollywood, and you'll find on the giant Ishtar gate that they have there, they have a depiction of Nimrod, a deified Nimrod. He's the one on the left right there. They got it on other motifs, a lot of Babylonian motifs, and this is Satan's seat in Hollywood, where he rewards his disciples for propagating his messages and keeping the parables alive. And he goes all the way back to Babylon, as we've talked about before. This here is more of a depiction of Tammuz, Nergal, his son. But even the awards for Hollywood and even the British Film Awards too as well are all about the gods, and which all goes back to Nimrod. Apollyon, the Oscar Awards are based on Egyptian gods too as well, references to Saturn, and Hollywood, of course, Hollywood in the city of angels. Now we're going to look at Jeremiah 10, which specifically references these memorial and commemorative events regarding what is often called the Christmas tree, but is really a Nimrod tree. And this is what a lot of teachers or preachers won't show you. They won't walk you through it. They'll just try to dismiss it by saying, oh, that's talking about idols, and we don't worship idols, and we don't worship the tree, so we're not even going to study it. Well, we're trying to get a understanding of current events from a Christian perspective and a biblical perspective, so we need to look at God's Word. So we're going to look at God's Word right now, study it, see what it says, and then align our heart and our life to what it says, not what we want it to say. So reading through it one time, starting at verse 1. Hear ye the word which the Lord speaketh unto you, O house of Israel. Thus saith the Lord, learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven. For the heathen are dismayed at them. For the customs of the people are vain. For one cutteth a tree out of the forest, the work of the hands of the workmen, with the axe. They deck it with silver and with gold. They fasten it with nails and with hammers that it move not. They are upright as the palm tree, but speak not. They must needs be born, because they cannot go. Be not afraid of them, for they cannot do evil, neither also is it in them to do good. It should catch our attention that it starts out with the same admonition that we find even in the book of Revelation, in the letters to the churches. Hear ye the word which the Lord speaketh unto you. In Revelation he said, he that hath an ear to hear what the Spirit saith to the churches. Our opinion, your opinion, my opinion, does not matter at all. God says, do you hear the word which he has been trying to tell us, and which he has recorded in his word for thousands of years? If we say we love the Lord and we want to commemorate him, then we should obey his word. Hear ye the word which the Lord speaketh unto you. And then the very first command is, learn not the way of the heathen. Don't pick it up. Don't practice it in your house. Don't bring it into your life. Don't make it part of your life. Don't learn it. which implies it doesn't matter whether you worship the tree or whether you actually believe what it represents. That's not even addressed. God doesn't even talk about that because that's not the heart of the matter. He says, don't even do it because it symbolizes something that is very offensive to God. And then goes in to connect that with, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven. And what signs in heaven are connected with the birth of Apollyon, Apollo, the sun god, winter solstice, when they practice cutting down the tree and doing all this stuff. Because they get all dismayed that, oh no, the sun's died. And then a couple days later they say, oh, okay, yeah, it's being born again. Oh, hooray, yay. And it's all about the sun and commemorating Nimrod. The two go together. Verse 3, notice he says customs. The customs of the people are vain. That's all this is. It's not worship of the tree, although some people do that. But he said, at its heart, it's a custom. It's a tradition. It's something they do every year. It's a way of the heathen. It's a custom. It's done in memorial. It's done in remembrance. This is their communion and remembrance of what their god Nimrod did. It's also a commemoration of his antichrist spirit, his anti-God rebellion. And he led it all at Babel. But it's a custom. Don't learn the customs, Christ said. Doesn't matter if you believe in what they stand for. He says don't even learn it. Don't even pick up the customs that they do. And then he goes straight into describing. It's almost as though he says, for example, one thing they do is they cut down a tree and they deck it. And notice it doesn't say they carve it into an idol and paint it and do all that other stuff, which a lot of people like to think that it says. No, it says they deck it. They decorate it. Even the song, Deck the Halls with Boughs of Holly. That doesn't mean carve your house into an idol. No. Plain English and understanding says this means decorate it. They decorate it with silver and with gold. And we talked about that before as well too. So when you actually look at what the Bible says, it's pretty obvious it's not talking about carving an idol. It's talking about a custom and a tradition that is done yearly to commemorate an event tied to the signs in the heavens that take place on the winter solstice and 3 days after that. But then keep on going down, it says, they fasten it with nails and with hammers that it move not. Remember, this is the day before fancy tree stands and all that. So they have to use nail and some scraps of wood to prop it up. But as we talked about before, that's part of the story. Nimrod was cut down in his prime, so to speak. And so the whole process is to re-prop up what has been cut down. His resurrection, his coming back in pattern type. And that's part of the story. But then this next one is even further tells you this is not an idol. They are upright as the palm tree. And he's talking about that's why they make the trees. That's why they prop it up. Is because just like a palm tree, you can cut down a palm tree. You can burn it down to the ground even. But it will still sprout and grow back again. It will come back from the apparent dead. And that's the whole picture that they're doing with this custom. To take a tree that's been cut down, raise it up, and fix it so that it doesn't fall back down again. And then they decorate it. And they go all crazy. And they specifically decorate it with gold and silver, particularly balls. And it represents their god, Nimrod, and the different derivations of that. But it's a commemoration. It's a custom. It's done in remembrance of one who is very offensive to God. Think about that. Nimrod, the one who, in open rebellion against God, he would spit in God's face if he could. He married his mother, very sick people, in open rebellion against God. And this is the events that are commemorated. And God said in Jeremiah 10, don't do this particular one specifically. Of all the customs that he could have listed out, he picked this one because it was most offensive. People say, well, I don't believe that, so I can do that in my house and life because I don't think it's offensive. It doesn't matter what you think. These were instituted as offensive customs. They were meant to commemorate one who's offensive to God. It's offensive to God. And until that changes, then it's always going to be offensive to God. You could take innocent things, such as your middle finger, in the right time and context, it could be used in a very offensive way. And the same is true with evergreen trees and a whole bunch of other stuff. In the right context, done at the right time, it can be extremely offensive. And so when we consider this time of year, with all that it represents, and these particular customs at this time period, it's very offensive to God. It's like spitting in God's face to do that at this time. And we always need to keep that in mind. It's the very concept he's trying to get across in Jeremiah is the very fact of having what that represents in your house and in your life is extremely offensive to God. It's like giving God the middle finger because of who it's connected to. Someone who would spit in God's face if they had the chance. And they kicked off a whole effort to break into heaven to do just that. And Christians think we can have that in our house and not be offensive to God? No. God says, don't even learn it, don't pick it up, don't bring it into your house. That is what this whole season is about. Some other interesting celestial events that are going on, though, right now that we need to pay attention to in context with how the enemy seems to be pointing at this time of year as something very significant that they expect to happen. We also see that there is a full moon this December 25th. And this is the first full moon on December 25th since 1977. This is not normal. This is abnormal. And like we've said before, every time we see abnormal celestial events, even though they're not big meteors going across the sky or something like that, you can have seemingly small abnormal celestial events that point to significant things. And every time we see something like that or hear about it, we should automatically look at, if it's so abnormal, what are the times that it's pointing to? Because our whole heavens, Genesis tells us, God created to be a gigantic clock. We are literally living inside a gigantic clock. And so when we see things that are abnormal and not done on a daily and monthly and sometimes even yearly cycle, it should catch our attention to what time is it pointing to. And when we look at this particular full moon on December 25th, and it does not happen very often, and we learn that this is only the 9th full moon that has been on December 25th since our country was founded back on December 25th, 1776, was the first time in our country's history as America. Well, that year was very significant, obviously, and now we have a celestial sign pointing back to that exact time period, which in context of everything else we've been studying is highly suspicious. So we have an abnormal celestial event happening on December 25th, and then on top of that, it's pointing back to 1776. Then back on the 18th was when the sun, when you look up at the sky and the constellations, was when the normal yearly cycle of the sun switched over to the constellation Sagittarius. Again, this is astronomy, not astrology. Astrology is trying to pick your birthday and trying to find out your future from your stars and all that. That's wrong. That's occult. But astronomy is given for signs and seasons and to tell the times. And it works just like clockwork. And we just happen to be at the December 21st, this year, it's the 22nd winter solstice, when the sun is in Sagittarius. It's, when you look out in the night sky, it's in Sagittarius, which is the horseman, the archer, and we've talked about this in our previous video. Watch that for more on ties to all what's been going on right now. But that switched over on the 18th. And in context of everything that we've been looking at with the four horsemen and all the other messaging that's going on right now, and even his ties to Apollo and Nimrod and Nergal, that should catch our attention. That the hands on the celestial clock are ticking over to symbolic messages that are also being echoed by the enemy. And that Christ even said, when you hear them say peace and safety, you know sudden destruction cometh. So we should be even further alarmed that the celestial clock is now also ticking over to the signs of the destroyer. But that's not all. Something that distinguishes Sagittarius the archer from the other 13 constellations in the sky is that the sun shines in front of this constellation on the December solstice. On that day, the sun will be specifically right over Sagittarius, pointing smack at it. What does the book of Revelation talk about? The rider on the white horse with the bow and the destroyer and all the connections with Apollyon, Apollo, and that's all the messaging we see coming together on one single day by the enemy, and even the celestial signs are pointing toward that. I don't know what's going to happen. Write that down right now. I don't know what's going to happen. The Bible says we do not know the day or the hour that Christ will come, but it does say you will see the day approaching. You will see things quickly coming together, and you will see that day approaching. It's not talking necessarily about the day he's coming, but that you'll see the day that everything is coming right toward that. And if you haven't been paying attention, then you're missing out on a lot. Watch our videos. We are very, very close. We've heard the calls for peace and safety. We know sudden destruction comes. And now we have celestial signs pointing toward that we're very, very, very close. We talked about in previous videos of how December 21st had great significance and how we think it will also have additional prophetic implications as well. But then we are now at the third winter solstice since then, coming to the exact same time period on the cyclical clock. We also need to keep in mind that this year they decided to declare as the International Year of Light, all of 2015, and we're running out of 2015 real quick. But what symbol did they use? They used a sun symbol in the very logo for it. And when we look on the back of the dollar bill with all the symbolism that they have encoded there, it shouldn't surprise us that the logo that they picked to represent this year also is very, very similar to the symbology that they have encoded on the dollar bill, which points toward this year. The suns and the shining stars, the illumination right above the phoenix. You know it's a phoenix because it has that little tuft of hair at the back of its head. That's what distinguishes it in heraldry from a normal eagle. That's a phoenix. America's identified with the phoenix. America is, I believe, going to be one of the 3 countries that's uprooted by the Antichrist. On the other side, we see the pyramid seal with the all-seeing eye, the connotation with the sun, the sun rays, and other Masonic emblem where you see the same idea of the radiant sun too as well. The sun god is who they see coming on the scene. Nimrod, and especially in Freemasonry, there's a lot of exaltation of Nimrod. But the seal, there's so much there. And when you just look at American history, the development of the seal and some of the sketches that they went through of what they tried to incorporate into this, it should definitely raise some eyebrows. Because even back when they were trying to figure out what seal designs they were going to use, one of the first ones that they looked at was doing a Mayan step pyramid, which that's to show you some bells. And then another concept was having a literal phoenix coming out of a fire on top of a torch. One designer called Barton, he wanted to have one design with a pyramid with a palm tree at the very top. And he had this explanation. On the summit of it, a palm tree proper. The palm tree, when burnt down to the very root, naturally rises fairer than ever. End quote. That's what they wanted to have on top of the pyramid, which is exactly what Jeremiah chapter 10 describes and references in allusion to what commemorates Nimrod, the one who started the Tower of Babel works. And even the Bible likens him and uses and references the idea of a palm tree, how you can cut it down and it will come back up. That was one of the ideas they were considering for our American seal of our country. That's on our money. And that's still basically the same idea that's on there now, the pyramid and the sun god at the top of it. So when we look at it, considering a Mayan connotation too as well, and also present day, if we take the different levels and consider them as Mayan cartoons, cycles of years, that brings us to the top of the pyramid at 2012. So in a sense, they're pointing toward the sun god in 2012, which would have been December 21st, 2012. That winter solstice. But then also when you take the date, the founding, supposedly, of America, which is actually the founding of their illuminated order, and starting the progression toward bringing and finishing the work, 1776, when you translate that over to the Freemasonry years, you add 4,000 years, so that brings it to 5,776. Anno Lucius, the year of light. This is the year of light declared by the UN, so that should raise some bells there too. But then on the Hebrew calendar, this is now 5,776 on their calendar. It switched over to that back at the Feast of Trumpets. So now in this short window of time in the year of light, we find multiple references that this is the year that they have been working toward to come together for Apollyon, the sun god. And that 1776 automatically should ring some bells with the full moon that's also happening on the 25th, which the first time in our nation's history was also that year. The celestial sign in the heavens is pointing toward that significant date when the mystery of iniquity was starting its major kickoff. But that's not all. Last month we saw the big push for peace and safety, and one of the major high dollar venues was the Pepsi Black Knight Decoded film. Watch our video on that as well. Big pushes for peace and using the occult broken cross symbol for that as well. But there are multiple references to Apollyon too, the eye, and then had the same light references to the halftime show that Pepsi also produced, and contacting aliens, and it used the same symbolic building that was used in Independence Day, which also had its commercial for the Resurgence trailer just a few days ago. That's not a coincidence. All about contacting aliens, and then Times Square. And if you'll remember from the trailer, one thing about it is they mentioned that at the next full moon is when they were looking for a signal. Now we thought, and other people thought, that they were referencing the immediate next moon, which is only a few days after they produced it. But other people are now suggesting, and when you think about it, that they are not talking about the immediate full moon, but the next, as in the one after this next one. In other words, the one after this one that was coming up in a few days. The next full moon would be December 25th. With all the signs and messaging we see about the aliens and Independence Day in combination with this Pepsi and the peace and calls for peace and safety and everything coming together for this next week, it should definitely raise some serious eyebrows. Again, I don't know what's going to happen, but it looks like we need to pay attention because sudden destruction is coming, and we should not expect it to get any better. The Independence Day Resurgence trailer came out just a few days ago, and they specifically highlighted Washington, D.C., with the obelisk and the Pentagon, and big hints that destruction is coming again. But I don't know what's going to happen, but you had better be ready. There are two individuals about to be revealed to the world. The Son of Man, who's about to be revealed in the days of Noah, and the man of iniquity, who's going to be coming with all power and signs and lying wonders. And Christ warns us, remember Lot's wife. Don't live for this world. Live for eternity. Live for Christ. Have Christ first and highest above all else. And when He is first, you will have no problem setting aside reminders and customs of the heathen, especially ones that commemorate and exalt the Antichrist, the anti-God, things that are offensive to God. You will have no trouble setting that aside. So now is when we examine our heart and our life and we see what light is shining in my life. Am I holding up Satan's light, the false light, or am I holding up Christ's light? Is that truly seen in my life? When Christ returns, what is He going to see? That's what's going to matter, not my opinions, not some pastor or teacher's opinions. What is Christ going to see in your life? Is He going to see Christ in your life? Or is He going to see the world in you? I pray that God will use these messages to wake us up, to consider where we are, so that we will strive to have a clean heart, clean hands, be pure and white without spot or wrinkle, to be found in peace when He returns. Remember Lot's wife. Maranatha.